There are likely a lot of property owners out there who can save money now by doing what you've said and ensuring that they meet that specific requirement. And they need to do it in December if they want to save money in 2026.
That is correct.
Greetings from Costa Rica. It's Friday, November 21st. Today, I'm joined by Alberto Sáenz Roesch of Invicta Legal. Hopefully, I said your name accurately enough, Alberto. How are you doing today?
Hi, Matt. How are you? You did. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to join you here, Matt. Thank you so much, as always.
Of course. We are going over critical information for AirBNB owners in Costa Rica. Obviously, there has been a law in place regulating short-term rentals in Costa Rica for some time. You are going to see enforcement of this law step up in 2026. And so all owners who are short-term renting their property should be definitely coming into compliance and making sure that they're covered. So today we're going to go over the contents of that 2020 law. We're going to cover the legal requirements to operate an Airbnb in Costa Rica. We'll see whether or not this applies to long-term leases. We'll also go over whether or not they're in fact, how they are being enforced, and many other nuances of important Airbnb rules. If you are interested in contacting Alberto, his email address is right here. Be sure to reach out for great legal advice. Alberto, again, thank you very much for joining me. And without further ado, give us a quick overview. What the heck was this June 1st, 2020 law, number 9742?
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, sure. So basically, long story short, I've been hearing recently about a new law, new requirements, new legal obligations. So yeah, I believe your introduction was perfect. It's not that new. I mean, it's recent. It was approved on June the 1st, 2020. There's a set of regulations that the ICT had to approve in relation with this law. And the ICT did that in October 21st, 2021. So the law started applying on June 2020. The regulations coming from ICT were finished by October 2021. Okay, so now let's get to the reason why this new law was approved. In our country, just like in many other countries around the world, there has been a lot of informality, right, around the short-term rentals business. Buyers, owners saying, okay, I'm going to make some money out of this nice property with this great location near the beach or near the city, whatever, and I'm going to get some money out of it. Maybe it's my second house, and I just wanted to generate money while I move down to Costa Rica, and at least to pay the expenses and maintenance and taxes, or maybe even to make a nice profit per year, which is perfectly possible in good locations and with good properties, right? So the thing is, due to the informality that we've had throughout several years, there has been a lot of pressure from the government, from the tax office, and a lot from the Costa Rican Board of Tourism, ICT, and from the hoteliers. What's happening, or what has been happening during the last few years, where many owners were really informal and they were not declaring their income, they were not getting permits. They were simply, carrying out this business, getting some money, and maybe in some occasions, maybe even in good faith, because I've heard many people say, well, I have this house in Playa Negra, lovely house, steps to the beach, people love it, I rent it by the night, but I do it through Airbnb, let's say, right? And, I don't do it in Costa Rica. I do it through Airbnb. I have my bank account in the US. My renters are from the US or Canadians or Europeans, and they pay me in my US bank account. I'm not really doing much in Costa Rica, right? Well, unfortunately, yeah, all of that could be the case, but still what triggers the income is the rental of a house that is located down in our little nice country, right? So the triggering of the income comes from the existence of the house, and the renters are enjoying the house in Costa Rica and the rental in Costa Rica. So the activity is taxed in Costa Rica by the Costa Rican tax office. The hoteliers have been saying, well, we've been negatively impacted by the boom on all these short-term rentals, and we have to level the field, they say, because we're paying a lot of taxes, we're paying for patents, we're paying for commercial permits, we're paying for a lot of employees, Social Security, labor risk insurance, all those costs, right? So they're saying, well, how are we going to be able to compete with these owners that are not paying a dime and are staying on the informality? So I would say, Matt, this has become now even a political thing. So
for sure.
It's definitely something important for the tax office, but it has become something important for the Costa Rican Board of Tourism. Also, the Costa Rican Board of Tourism wants to better understand the real numbers of tourists coming to Costa Rica. And,
for sure.
By having the short-term rentals under the radar, it's impossible for them to get additional feedback on this, right? So based on all of this, the bill was presented and then the law was approved. So that's where we're coming. And of course, as with many things in our little country, things sometimes take time to actually be enforced. So even though this law was approved since June 2020, it was more than a year for the ICT. When I say ICT, that's the Costa Rican Board of Tourism, right? So yeah, as you have it on the screen. Thank you. So basically, it took more than a year and 3 months or so, for the ICT to issue the regulations needed for the enforcement of the law. And now it has taken some time for the government and the tax office to enforce. So let's jump.
I was going to say, you can definitely understand, especially in Costa Rica, some of these hotel owners, and Costa Rica is widely known for having a wonderful percentage of small boutique hotel owners in addition to the big players. They're important businesses in communities, and especially in a small town like Playa Negra, for example, or Playa Junquial, absolutely you can see how their business is directly impacted when all of a sudden everybody's house is available on Airbnb. And like you said, people were just not paying the same sort of costs. They didn't have the same overhead as those hotels themselves. So let's talk about what legal requirements were brought into place for short-term rentals on Airbnb and other platforms through this law. What specific documents and other things do people have to get in order to legally operate an Airbnb?
Absolutely. So based on the law, the owner of the property, the registered owner of the property, number one, needs to get registered as an active person if it's an individual, or entity if it's a company. We normally recommend for foreigners to purchase real estate property in Costa Rica through a Costa Rican company. On a different meeting, we can go over those details. But so for the owner to be registered as a taxpayer, as an active entity paying income tax and collecting VAT, value-added tax from renters, and delivering the VAT also to the tax office. So number one, you need to get registered at the tax office, okay? Now, when you get registered at the tax office for purposes of the income tax and for purposes of the VAT, you can choose between two different regimes. And I don't know if you want to talk about that now or if you have more questions about the two regimes.
We will get to that in just a moment, for sure.
Okay, so you get registered. Then you need to have a municipal permit, operating permit, or patent, if you want to call it that way, okay? In order to get the municipal patent, which, by the way, the municipal patent obviously is issued by the corresponding local government, the municipality. In the case of the beaches you've been talking about, the municipality of Santa Cruz, which is the town nearby that covers the whole county, and those beaches are part of that county. So in order to get that municipal patent from the municipality of Santa Cruz in your case, you need to follow several steps. Number one, you need to knock on their door and ask them for a first document, which is a municipal resolution of location of the property. The purpose of this first step is for them to verify if, based on the zoning of your property, your property is eligible or not for short-term rentals, okay? Because the law considers short-term rentals to be a commercial activity. So they have to check that. So once they get back to you with the municipal resolution of location, you have that paper on your hands. You then need to, yeah.
In Spanish, we're talking about a certificado de uso de suelo, or
actually that one's called resolución de ubicación municipal.
Okay.
Okay.
They're different, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it will have similar content to the one of an uso de suelo, but it's specifically for the purposes of this process. Okay. For the resolución de ubicación municipal, for this first step, your property needs to have a registered survey plan. There are still some properties that do not have a survey plan. The municipality is not going to be able to issue this document if you don't have a survey plan, because they need to use the survey plan of your property to be able to perfectly understand the exact location of your property on the zoning regulations or whatever, right? A legal access, public road frontage, access through an easement, etc. So this is the first step. Besides this, you need to obtain from the local health department office what is called like the sanitary permit. In Spanish, again, that is called Permiso Sanitario de Funcionamiento. Many people refer to it as the PSF, Permiso Sanitario de Funcionamiento. On the Permiso Sanitario de Funcionamiento, you're going to tell to the health department office, hey guys, I want to do short-term rentals. I'm going to have this activity. And then you declare on the oath the conditions of the property, having, everything needed to actually have a short-term rentals unit with their bathrooms and the number of bedrooms and the kitchen and all of that, right?
Yep.
Even the wastewater, if it's a regular septic tank or whatever. Once you get the Permiso Sanitario de Funcionamiento, or PSF, from the health department office, and you have also the Resolución de Ubicación Municipal that I described first, then you file for the request of the patente. In order to do this, you also need to comply with a strange additional requirement, which is an easy one to comply with, but many people forget and then they will get rejected. And that one is called a registration at the ACAM, A-C-A-M. The ACAM is the Association for Artists of Costa Rica. So this is a requirement in the law, because in theory, when you have a commercial establishment where you're going to be, let's say, using radios or TVs, etc., you need to pay a low amount per year to the ACAM. So you need to get registered at ACAM. Normally, they will ask you how many TVs and how many bedrooms, and they're going to charge you in accordance to that. It's going to be like $400 per month, depending on how many bedrooms. Per year.
Okay.
by your reaction, I figured I was making a mistake. So sorry, It's going to be like $400 per year. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem, but
so you
still,
get
that's nothing. These little charges, $33 a month here, it definitely starts to accumulate. And you can see specifically why, if I had done all of this as a hotel owner and you had people receiving guests in their properties without any of it, for sure you'd be pushing for legislation that everybody has to do it in order to host tourists here in the country.
Exactly. Okay, so with these requirements that I just described, you finally obtain your famous patent for your short-term rentals house, assuming that everything went out okay and you got the requirements, right? So now you are legally allowed by the municipality to carry out your short-term rentals activity. You're going to have to pay a yearly patent fee. Every year you need to renew your patent, and the tax for the patent is not that much, and it's going to be based on your tax declaration of the previous year. So you're going to pay, like on 2026, you're going to, by the beginning of 2026, you're going to pay based on the income of 2025. In the case of the first year, it's just going to be based on a projected, a kind of good faith projection, and then it's going to be adjusted every year. It's not a big amount of money, but it will add up, as you well said, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you have your municipal patent, the law also demands for you to comply with another step, which is an easy one. And that is to get your company registered at the ICT database as a company that owns a property that carries out the short-term rentals activities, okay? So based on this new law, the ICT is the governmental agency that will have all the list of all the properties and owners that are, doing this business. This is another detail which is really important, because sometimes people say, okay, I got registered at the tax office, I already got my patent, I'm good to go. And you cannot miss the ICT registration, because the law establishes a fine if you don't comply with this last step. And it's a really easy one. You get online, there's a system, you fill out the information on the number of bedrooms, etc., and the information of your property, the registered property number, and then boom, you get a confirmation that the request has been filed. And within a few days, they will basically send you a message confirming your registration, or if they need any additional info, they will let you know, okay?
Absolutely. So to summarize, essentially what people need to do, be registered as an active taxpayer. They have to obtain that patente municipal, which involves those sub-steps where you get your zoning certification, etc., and then you register with the ICT. And then you're good to go, and you can legally operate an Airbnb.
Absolutely. Now, let me just mention something else, which is not on all cases, but I just want to bring it up just in case. Okay, so you could have a company that works in the area. Let's say there's a company that provides pool maintenance or gardening maintenance for all those hotels and houses in Playa Negra, Junquillal, Callejones. Let's say you hire Avellanas, etc. Let's say you hire that company. Okay, you have a professional services relation with a commercial contract for maintenance, of the pool and the gardens. Let's say it could be the same story for a concierge company to, to meet and greet the clients and pamper them throughout their stay. If you even go there and you really have, like a concierge kind of person, or even for the cleaning services, you could hire a company that provides these services for a lot of clients. As long as you're having a relation with a real company that has a real operation, with several clients, etc., then that's it. You have your commercial services contract, you pay them, and that's a deductible expenses for your tax declaration, etc. You're good to go. If instead you have your own employees, let's say a cleaning lady or a gardener or a pool guy or a guard, if you have your own employees, please keep in mind that you're going to have to register your company owning the property as an employer at the Social Security of Costa Rica, the Social Security system. You need to get registered, and you need to report that employee or those employees under the name of your company, and you need to report their salary. And then you're going to have to pay the Social Security, which is basically for medical attention for the employees. And you're going to have to pay also a yearly workers' risk insurance policy to INS, which is the Costa Rican National Insurance Institute, if you have employees, only in that case, right? So you can choose. Maybe you want to have your eyes on the property. I myself own some short-term rental houses, and I have my own, at least one employee on each one, so they're my eyes on the property. But you could perfectly, outsource all of that with companies providing those services.
For sure. And To be clear, I know a lot of people out there when they're contracting with these part-time workers, a lot of times the worker may even say, no, I prefer to get a bigger salary rather than be getting, to receive my CAHA benefits. I've also heard that there's no legality to that, and that even if an employee declines their benefits to you, your legal obligation as someone who is directly employing them is to pay their CAHA, regardless of whether they've said, oh, I'd prefer just a higher salary. Is that accurate?
If you ever want to apply for a place on Invicta Legal on our labor law team, just let me know, because you're absolutely, absolutely correct. You got to be careful with that. You're bringing up a really good point.
Yep.
Yes, sometimes based on lack of knowledge, and sometimes there's no bad faith. They really say, oh, you're going to deduct this percentage, and I really prefer to have a few more thousand colones monthly for my living expenses. Well, unfortunately, that will put you, the owner, you're considered the strong party on the labor relation. And
Yep.
even if the employee was the one saying, don't worry, I'll sign you a paper, I'm okay with this, eventually a labor law judge is going to go after you and is going to say, no, you could not do this because the employees are not even legally entitled to renounce to those labor law rights. So you cannot go there, even though some workers would try. Unfortunately, if you do that, that would mean that you would be paying them the full amount and then also having the contingency. And you never know. Things are okay until they're not. And then they could go and talk with at the Ministry of Labor or with an attorney, and then they're told, hey, you could collect this huge amount of money for all these years you have not been receiving CAHA, etc. And then it's a really a big problem. So I could not recommend for anybody to do that.
Oh, totally. Now so we've got a summary of the requirements for short-term rentals now. Will this apply to long-term leases as well, or is it strictly for short-term rental contracts?
That's a great question. So in Costa Rica, if you're buying a house, you can decide to either do short-term rentals, for your renters that are coming for vacation, pleasure, even for business. And that's going to be based on the law that we have been discussing. And that's for rentals that are between 1 day and 1 year. Mm-hmm. Those are the short-term rentals as described on the law. Now, long-term leases are not bound by this law. It's a different law. It's the long-term general lease law, which has completely different rules. And that one would apply instead if I'm buying a house and I don't want to have to deal with check-ins, check-outs, concierge, constant management of the AirBNB account. Let's say I want to do passive income with a way more passive approach, and I just want to build this really nice house in Avellanas, and I don't want to worry too much about it. And I found there's an interesting market niche for long-term rentals to, whatever, professionals from San Jose coming to live for a few years in the area, whatever, right? Long-term lease. That's a different reality. And normally those leases are for more than a year. And as a matter of fact, there's something really important. The renter with a long-term lease, even if the contract signed mentions a shorter term, the renter for a long-term lease can stay for up to 3 years. Even if the contract says 2 years or a year and a half, as long as the renter is in full compliance and payment, etc., of the long-term lease obligations on its contract, the renter can stay for up to 3 years based on the law.
Now, it's interesting you say that. Could you just build into a 1-year lease contract, for example, that any additional months that they stay there, the rent will be X amount, and perhaps assign a really high amount for months 13 through 16 so that the renter is going to want to either leave or they'll be forced to not be compliant with the lease?
Yes, those kind of clauses could be structured, but this needs to be carefully reviewed on a case by case basis, because I'm going to tell you, there are some rules that are tricky and many people don't consider. For example, if you're leasing long term for residential purposes, and if you're agreeing on a lease payment in US dollars, according to the law, you cannot increase the lease payment if it's residential in dollars. So there are many
So it would be an
details
illegal
that
clause.
need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to the requirements for short-term leases. You said the law was approved in 2020. In 2021, ICT passed the regulations. A lot of foreigners watch and say, well, a lot of times in Costa Rica, the law, I hear that it's, sort of on the books. And then, for example, with the import tax law, it was a year or two before they had actual impact. These are in effect today, and right now these requirements are legally, you have these obligations right now in 2025?
Yes, look. Okay, so yes, the answer is yes, this is in effect. All these requirements are mandatory based on the law. Now, how is the government enforcing? Okay, the municipalities, each municipality and each county across the whole country, they are, each of them, going at their own pace. There are several municipalities that are being really proactive, really strict, and really fast. And there are several municipalities, I can tell you, I have seen municipalities going and shutting down a short-term rentals house because it does not have the corresponding patent from the municipality. And I've seen fines which are for like approximately $3,000 or $4,000 based on the owner carrying out a commercial activity without the corresponding permits. I'm going to give you a few examples around the country, because we have offices almost in the whole Pacific coastline, and we have strong presence in the whole Pacific coastline. So we've seen how different areas are enforcing a little bit more, a little bit less. For example, in Quepos, in the southern coast, in the municipality of Quepos, also in Osa, they are proactively checking, and we've seen notifications sent to owners, giving them a few days to get all these permits. Same story in the famous Santa Teresa Beach, Surfers Paradise. Santa Teresa, the municipality located in Coano. Well, it's a Coano district council.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah,
it's a canton, but
yeah, because it's on the other side of the Nicoya Peninsula, so they have a special case, which is a district council. The Coano District Council, they're also enforcing. They're being really strict. As a matter of fact, they were even so proactive that a few days ago, we discovered that they were getting on the AirBNB webpage. They were looking at the houses in Santa Teresa. They were looking on the pictures, the description of the location, the photos, and they were then being able to locate each of the houses and notifying the owners that are not already registered. So they're being very detail oriented, and they're going after that. I'm going to give you the example of Santa Cruz, which is, the county where all these beaches, Avellanas, Playa Negra, Junquillal, Marbella, are part of. Santa Cruz has been a little bit slower on this. This is definitely coming. I personally have not yet seen the municipality proactively notifying owners that don't have the permits yet. But I would say, Matt, I believe it's coming, and it's a matter of days or weeks or a few months, but it is coming. And the whole legislation is there, and they are slowly already, getting up to speed. And I can tell you now, recently, I've met, etc., with developers around the area of Tamarindo, real estate agents, owners of Airbnbs, etc., and they're already having this in mind. And just to clarify, Matt, the hotels in that area, in that county, there are many hotels in the county of Santa Cruz, and the hoteliers in that county are starting to put more pressure on the municipality for the effective enforcement of this.
I can imagine. I was showing here the map to give people an idea. Santa Cruz may be one of the counties that has absolutely the highest, it's a wedge of the coast that extends all the way from Las Catalinas and Playa Potrero up here, all the way down to Ostional, which is not on this particular image. Here you go. It does not include Nosara. That is the beginning of our next county south, or canton, of Nicoya. But they have this huge, wide coastline. There's an incredible amount of tourism in the county. And I remember back when I was in Peace Corps, it's identified routinely as one of the counties that has great potential, but that consistently is falling short in terms of tax revenue and services provided, given all of the development that has happened. So, I can imagine, I hope that some of this, obviously the municipal patentes are going to be directly benefiting the municipality. And I hope that tax revenue, in addition to property taxes that have finally been registered and actually collected on the actual basis of what people are paying for properties, I really hope that this will be another source of income for the municipality, because anybody who has driven down our roads has marveled at the difference between, wow, I'm driving to a multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar development. Sometimes the road specifically to that development is in terrible shape. Obviously, there are other problems in the canton, and one hopes that, yes, a new source of revenue and actually enforcing these taxes will give them the opportunity to, funnel some of this, all of the money coming in through development to services.
Yes, infrastructure is definitely urgent, and
Yeah. Speaking of taxes, you mentioned that there are two different regimes or regimens that people can be involved in when they are using Airbnb. Give us a quick overview. There's not a new, I mistakenly put new there, this 12.75% tax, or you can pay an income tax. Give us the difference between those two options for Airbnb owners here, and essentially how you can qualify for either.
Absolutely. We'll get into this point. Please remind me, Matt, there's another way through which the government is going to start enforcing all of this, but we can go there very soon. So to answer this, point number 5, it's very important for any buyer to identify the reason why he or she is buying this property in Costa Rica. If you're going to buy a property because you want to do, Airbnb, short-term rentals, if you want it to be an income-generating property, etc., you need to be clear about this. You need to tell this to your real estate agent. You need to tell, very important, you need to tell this to your attorney, because the due diligence when you're buying a property that you want for Airbnb purposes or short-term rental in general terms, it's going to be slightly different, because there's going to be an additional layer of review to make sure that that property is not only legally built and has utilities and services and access, etc., but it also entails an additional legal check of the ability to do short-term rentals on that particular property. Having said that, that investor, that buyer, that owner also needs to understand that a local accountant is needed. You may have your accountant back in the US or Canada or your European country, but you need a local accountant to take care of this. The accountant/tax advisor is going to be the one that would be giving you all these details about the two different income tax regimes, but I can give you generalities about this so you can better understand, because some accountants maybe don't really explain the good and the bad of each of the income tax regimes. So basically, Matt, to try to answer your question, when you get your company active at the tax office, you go and you say, okay, I'm going to do short-term rentals. I need my company to get as an active company for short-term rentals. the tax office is going to automatically register you as an active company doing short-term rentals under the what they call passive income from real estate regime. The passive income from real estate regime is the simplified income tax regime that the tax office came up with for all these owners, let's say, wanted to keep it simple. But, you know, keeping it simple could cost more money. That's why the analysis needs to be carefully made. Why am I saying this? Because the rule for this passive income from real estate regime is the following. You're going to have to pay a 15%. No, your numbers are correct. Your numbers are correct. I'm just doing the math to explain people where this is coming from. So you're going to have to pay a 15% over the 85% of your top line. Okay, so if you do the math, your number is correct. It ends up being 12.75% over your top line. But let's underline top line, right?
Yeah.
So you're not being able to deduct or write off all your deductible expenses, depreciation, financial cost of interest if you have a loan. You're not doing any of that. That's why it's supposed to be a simplified regime, because you don't even need to prove your expenses or anything. It's a really simple filing. And you simply, let's say I made $100,000 this year. That was my top line. God knows what my net was. I should know, and my accountant, but tax office doesn't care. They just say, okay, you made $100K. You're going to pay me $12,750. And that's it, a 12.75. That's it. Okay.
Yep.
Now let's run some numbers, or at least let's understand the logic behind this so that people don't fall into this potential trap. If you have a very, very efficient structure where your deductible expenses are really low and you have a really nice high margin short-term rentals business, if your net is really high, like a high percentage of your top line, then the 1275 passive income from real estate regime could be a really good one, because you're not leaving on the table a lot of expenses. And then it could be better just to pay the 1275 over the top line, because your net is really close. Let's say you have a net of, let's say you have a margin of 70% or 65% or 80%. Well, you know, the 1275 could be a better deal for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
no one has that.
If you have, okay, you have electricity, you have the maids, the cleaning, the pool guy, the gardener, you have depreciation of constructions, you have, you know, property taxes. Let's say you have HOA fees if your property is part of a condominium. You have repairs that you have to do, maintenance and repairs. You have the, you know, all these costs. If you end up having a margin of approximately 50% or even less than 50% as your net margin after taxes, after deductions and after depreciation, because even though depreciation is not like an expense on your cash flow, it's an expense on your accounting base, right? Yep. So if you have a margin lower than 50%, etc., then the 1275 over your top line could start, you know, not making that much sense, because you're leaving so many expenses and depreciation, etc., on the table. So you need to run your numbers with your accountant, and you need to decide. Normally, I'm going to say normally, but there could be different cases, but most frequently on short-term rentals, the migration to the other regime, which is the traditional corporate income tax regime, is more favorable. Okay, remember that normally if you're doing short-term rentals, on top of all the expenses I just said, you're probably going to have also a 15% fee that you have to pay to AirBNB. or to any other platform charging you 15%, 20%. I've seen some platforms even, or rental management companies even charging 25%, right?
Yep.
And then you may have a property manager, and the property manager takes care of your house. Let's say you live in California or in Miami, but so you need somebody to take care of your property, and you're paying property management. So in the end, in most cases for short-term rentals, this is very important, for short-term rentals, where you have a more active and a little bit heavier operation, it's going to be better through your accountant to migrate from the automatic de facto passive income from real estate regime to the traditional corporate income tax regime, where you pay based on your net. Okay. Yep. And there's a sliding scale. As a company under the traditional corporate income tax regime, you start paying for the first few million colones 5%, then you go up to 10, 15, 20, and you get up to a 30%. If you exceed on your top line approximately like $240,000 per year top line, if you exceed 240K top line, then you're already falling into the 30% category. But again, it's 30% over your net. So let's say you made 260K top line, but let's say your net is 110 or 120, then you're paying 30% over 110 or 120, right?
Yeah.
So you run your numbers, do this exercise with your accountants, do the homework, run the numbers. It could be harder at the very start, but you can then, make your decision. Something really important, you're not going to be able to switch from one regime to the other one in the middle of the tax year. So if you want to switch, you need to switch in December. Like I have many clients that are now getting ready to switch in a month from now, so that for year 2026, they're going to switch to the traditional corporate income tax regime. Now, I'm going to say one more thing, Matt. Sorry, I get passionate about it.
No, it's totally, there's already been more information than 7 or 8 of my typical broadcasts combined. So thank you.
Okay, great. Nice to hear that. Okay, so basically, there's one more thing. There's always something, right? So to switch from the passive income from real estate regime to the corporate income tax, traditional, income tax regime, there is one more requirement that you need to keep in mind. And that is for that one, you definitely need to have at least a part-time employee, at least one. And it could be part-time. And you need to get it registered at Social Security, which is called Caja Costarricense del Seguro Social. You can see the CCSS. That's Caja. That's that's it. So, you need to have, like what I've seen many clients do is they're not going to have like a really expensive employee, but at least, let's say they outsource most of it, but they at least have, let's say, a cleaning lady. So at least they have one of their own employees, because this is a requirement to be accepted to migrate to the traditional corporate income tax regime, where you pay over the net. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are likely a lot of property owners out there who can save money now by doing what you've said and ensuring that they meet that specific requirement. And they need to do it in December if they want to save money in 2026.
That is correct.
That is extremely valuable advice, Alberto. I can't thank you enough for going over everything that you have covered today regarding Airbnb properties. Greatly appreciate the information. And for my clients out there who are looking for advice regarding this, Alberto will be looking forward to receiving your emails at the address below. Remember, folks, if you want to get in touch with me regarding real estate in that Santa Cruz County that we just discussed, which extends from Potrero through Flamingo, Grande, down through Tamarindo, Langosta, Avellanas, Negra, Junquial, and including Ostional, you can contact me at matt@costaricamat.com. Again, thanks so much, Alberto, licenciado. Un gran gusto. Muchísimas gracias por venir a hablar con nosotros y la audiencia hoy.
You're very welcome, Matt. Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Have a great afternoon and pura vida.
Likewise, pura